You can kill an entire squad of enemies by using just one ability in Black Flag Resynced. Surprised? You should be, because the Assassin's Creed games usually feel pretty realistic and grounded, but as you progress, unlock new weapons, skills, and abilities, something interesting happens. Your character becomes so ridiculously overpowered that the word difficulty practically disappears from the dictionary. Whether it's Assassin's Creed 1, Black Flag, or as I just mentioned, the newly released Black Flag Resynced. So today we're finding the most overpowered skill, ability, or mechanic in every Assassin's Creed game, and as far as I can tell, you'll only get about 7 of them right. On the surface, most people would assume that because AC1 was the first game in the series, it would not have any overpowered skills or abilities. But that's where you'd be wrong. In fact, you get one almost right at the beginning of the game. Right after unlocking the Hidden Blade and learning the basics of combat, you might be tempted to take it into an open fight. If you do, chances are that you'll get hit a lot because the Hidden Blade doesn't exactly look like a weapon designed for direct combat. But this is where the overpowered part comes in. If you press the counter button just before an enemy lands a strike, shink, they die instantly, because the Hidden Blade isn't just a one-shot kill tool for stealth, it's also a one-shot kill tool for open combat. You can use this technique against almost every enemy in the game, whether it's a regular swordsman or a heavily armored knight. The funny thing is, the game never actually tells you about it. It's one of those mechanics you discover through pure trial and error, almost like a reward for experimenting. But once you master it, I genuinely don't think you'll ever need a sword or dagger again. And this is probably the closest we'll ever get to experiencing lore-accurate Altair in the game, because the gameplay in AC1 doesn't always do justice to how legendary he's supposed to be. But this mechanic certainly does. So if you ever replay Assassin's Creed 1, give it a try at least once. If the Hidden Blade counter was the most powerful skill or ability, then hold your horses, because this one is even more lethal and much faster. In AC2, we get the true vision of the series, where we now have a much bigger variety of weapons and tools. If we leave the weapons aside because, well, the Hidden Blade is just as OP as it was in AC1, we have a whole bunch of tools to choose from. And among all of them, the most overpowered isn't the hidden gun or the poison. It's the good old trusty smoke bomb. Now you might be thinking, what? Why did you choose the smoke bomb above everything else? And that's exactly where you're wrong. The hidden gun is lethal, sure, but only to a certain degree. You can get spotted, and sometimes the shot won't even one-shot an enemy. It also depends on how long you hold the shoot button. And poison? Well, for that to work, you actually have to get close to the enemy and poison them first. But with the smoke bomb, none of that matters. You can simply walk up to a group of enemies, drop the smoke bomb, and start assassinating almost everyone in your radius. Brutes, agile guards, the tougher enemies, all dead by your hand. And there's practically no limit to how ridiculous you can get with it. Plus, it looks cool as hell. You can wipe out an entire group of guards and then casually walk away like nothing happened. This is possibly my favorite tool in the entire game, or should I say ability, because technically in the old AC games, these tools pretty much functioned as abilities. Sadly, the smoke bomb has been nerfed quite a bit in the newer games, but back then, this was the era when it was at its absolute peak. Now we're talking about actual skills, not because the previous didn't count as one, but we had to place them carefully. This time around, there's a clear difference between a skill and an ability, and in Brotherhood, the framework is just like AC2 but improved to make a difference. And the most overpowered skill in the whole game is the Arrow Barrage, or should I say Arrow Storm, and let me remind you what it is. For the first time ever in Assassin's Creed, Brotherhood became the game to actually show what a mentor feels like. Instead of being an assassin in training, you could train and deploy other assassins on the run. With each assassin leveling up, the more you use him or send him on different missions across the globe. It was a breath of fresh air and probably Brotherhood's strongest suit or highlight. You could recruit up to 12 assassins, and this is where the fun actually begins. Once you fill the slots for all 12 assassins, you unlock an ability called Arrow Storm. It's pretty self-explanatory, as it was also teased in the cinematic trailer, where once the meter for the recruits gets filled to the maximum, you press and hold LB or L1 and boom. Your assassins launch arrows from all sides, rendering the enemies dead in seconds. Even if you have 100 enemies on your back, using this ability will kill all of them instantly without any delay, which makes it one of the most overpowered and broken abilities in the entire game. But what do you think? Did it make combat easier and non-challenging? Let us know in the comments. If your answer was no and you think the combat should have been made more challenging, then congratulations. AC Revelations actually tried to do that. In that game, the kill streak was nerfed compared to Brotherhood, mainly because the developers wanted to show the power of the elite enemies or maybe Ezio's advancing age. But whatever the reason, the kill streak lost its place as the most overpowered ability in the game. However, the devs added something else in its place, something that required a bit more time to master, and I bet you aren't expecting this one. The poison, or more specifically the Datura bomb. With Revelations, we got a much more complex version of crafting, where we could basically become our own version of Walter White and use a little bit of chemistry knowledge to create bombs with their own unique pros and cons. Some were designed to create distractions, while others were basically upgraded versions of the good old smoke bomb. But in my opinion, the Datura bomb is usually the best variation of them all. And here's why. First of all, it's basically an upgraded smoke bomb, but a lethal one. It creates a poisonous cloud using Datura powder, which you can easily obtain by looting chests or finding it at bomb crafting posts throughout Constantinople. And whenever you throw one of them at an enemy or a group of enemies, it doesn't really matter how strong, deadly, or fast they are. Eventually, they're all going to die from choking, because, well, they have to breathe. And when you combine that with different shell types and components that increase the radius or prolong the duration of that effect, you can create some absolutely ridiculous combinations. You can basically obliterate almost anyone who gets in your way by throwing this thing from a safe distance. And before you say, but Faxx, that's more of a tool than a skill or ability, just remember, crafting bombs is an ability, and a damn good one at that. In AC3, almost everything from the previous games was carried over, but with a twist. Some features were deliberately nerfed or made more challenging, like the kill streak, while others were completely new, such as the rope dart. Now, at first glance, the rope dart seems like the obvious choice for the most overpowered tool in the game. And honestly, it's a magnificent candidate. It's silent, deadly, versatile, and works brilliantly in both stealth and open combat. You can hang enemies from trees, pull them towards you, and eliminate targets without making a sound. It's overpowered. But it's not the most overpowered thing in AC3, because once you take a look at the DLC, The Tyranny of King Washington, everything changes. You quickly realize that Connor basically becomes a god. No, seriously. If you've played the DLC, you'll know it's an alternate reality where Connor gains supernatural abilities in order to fight a corrupted George Washington. And those abilities, my god, they're overpowered. With each episode, you unlock a new power. One allows you to transform into an eagle for rapid traversal. Another lets you become a wolf, turning stealth into an absolute joke. But the most overpowered ability of them all is unlocked in the final episode, the bear. And trust me, it lives up to the name. This ability is built entirely around crowd control, combat, and pure brute force. Connor transforms into a massive bear and absolutely steamrolls anyone unfortunate enough to stand in his way. And if you played AC3, you'll know how annoying large groups of enemies can sometimes be. But with this ability, they stop being a problem. You wipe them out in seconds and keep moving forward like nothing happened, making him arguably the most overpowered protagonist in the series before Cassandra and Eivor arrived. Because long before demigods became common in Assassin's Creed, Connor was already one. In Black Flag, things changed quite a bit. A large portion of the gameplay now took place at sea rather than on land, and since we now have two versions of Black Flag, I decided to seamlessly integrate both into one section. For the original Black Flag, to be very honest, the game took AC3's combat system and added a few extra tricks on top of it, which means that if the rope dart was the most overpowered tool in AC3, it's definitely one of the strongest contenders in AC4 as well. That's just how it was. And if you're wondering about a Black Flag Resynced and hoping things are different, well, not really. The game is different from the original in many ways, including its combat system, but when it comes to land combat, nothing feels as absurdly overpowered as you'd expect. You now get an entire wheel of abilities that didn't exist in the original game, and out of all of them, the most overpowered one I found was the kick. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. You kick an enemy, that's it. But the reason it's so strong is because it completely breaks their defense and almost guarantees a takedown afterwards. So while it's easily the strongest land-based ability in the remake, it still isn't the most overpowered thing in the entire game, because that title belongs to the Jackdaw. And this is where I can confidently say that in both the original Black Flag and Black Flag Resynced, the undisputed goat of an ability is the heavy shot. Here's why. Once you have fully upgraded the Jackdaw, a single heavy shot can absolutely devastate enemy ships. Even the Man of War, one of the toughest ships in the game, can be reduced to a 2-hit kill. Just like that. It's genuinely that overpowered. Brigs and frigates, both gone. Most regular ships don't even get a chance to fight back before they're turned into floating debris. The moment you fire a heavy shot and watch a massive chunk of the enemy ship's hull disappear instantly is one of the most satisfying feelings in the entire game, which is why I'm glad it carried over into the remake and remained just as overpowered as it was in the original, because some abilities make combat easier, and heavy shot makes naval warfare unfair. Rogue is identical to Black Flag in, let's say, 9 out of 10 ways, but that of missing one, that's where it shines. As we just mentioned, the game follows the same two-part gameplay structure, one on foot and one at sea. This time around, the developers put a greater emphasis on on-foot gameplay, but that doesn't mean naval combat was ignored. Far from it. For on-foot gameplay, we get something incredibly satisfying. The blowpipe from AC-4 is replaced by a futuristic silent weapon for its time, the air rifle. It's silent, precise, deadly, and honestly fits Shay's personality perfectly. But that's not where it reaches its full potential. Later in the story, Shay upgrades the air rifle to fire grenades. And that's where this weapon becomes absolutely ridiculous. Fun fact, this ability is essentially a reimagined version of the blunderbuss from Black Flag's Freedom Cry DLC. And once unlocked, you can wipe out anywhere from 4 to 10 enemies with a single shot. And somehow it feels just as satisfying every single time. There are 3 grenade types available, just like the DARS: Sleep, Berserk, and Shrapnel. The Sleep and Berserk variants are useful and increase the area of effect, but the real star of the show is the Shrapnel grenade. The moment it lands, bam! Everything inside the blast radius drops dead. Doesn't matter how many enemies there are, if they're standing too close together, they're gone. And trust me, it's an absolute treat to watch. Now, just like Black Flag, the heavy shot also returns in Rogue, but this time it gets some backup. The Puckle guns. These weapons function similar to the swivel guns from Black Flag, but instead of firing a limited number of powerful shots, they're transformed into what is basically an 18th century machine gun. And when you combine that with the Morrigan's incredible speed, naval combat becomes a treat. The most complicated case of love and hate for me is Unity. Whenever I try to get into the feel of the game, I instantly back off, and there are many reasons for that. One of them is the combat system. Unlike the previous games, Unity heavily punishes mistakes. Without proper skills, gear, or practice, you will get overwhelmed and killed surprisingly fast. But what if I told you there's one overpowered ability that makes things much easier while also helping you rank up faster? The Staggering Strike. It's a skill you can unlock, and it's one of the most useful abilities in the entire game. Because in Unity, you'll frequently fight brutes and elite guards with incredibly strong defenses. Normally, breaking through those defenses requires a perfectly timed parry. Luckily, this skill completely bypasses that requirement. All you have to do is hold the attack button, and Arno will perform a powerful shoulder strike that staggers the enemy and leaves them completely defenseless. After that, you can simply finish the job. The best part is that it works against almost every enemy type that is normally a pain to deal with, especially the elite guards that take forever to kill and hit like a truck. But that's only half of the reason why this ability is so good. The other half is the Creed points. Every successful use grants Creed points, which contribute to increasing your rank. So if you find a group of enemies and repeatedly use this skill, you'll keep earning points over and over again. In some cases, you can gain around 100 Creed points per use and climb to the ranks much faster than the average player. It's one of those abilities that's useful both in combat and progression, which makes it incredibly valuable. Syndicate features 2 protagonists, which means I'll have to talk about both of them, right? Well, no. The thing is, Jacob doesn't really have a skill or ability that I personally consider overpowered. And I know a lot of Jacob fans are about to get triggered hearing that, but hey, it's Faxx. So that leaves us with Evie, and oh boy, does she have some absolutely ridiculous abilities. Unlike Jacob, Evie is heavily focused on stealth, and that's one of the reasons I like playing as her so much. Most of her best skills revolve around staying hidden, but if we're talking about the single most overpowered one, there's no competition, it's the Chameleon. This ability is so simple that it almost sounds unfair. If you stay crouched and remain idle for a few seconds, Evie gradually becomes invisible to enemies. That's it. And it's very useful. In situations where you cannot find a hiding spot or don't have enough cover, you can just crouch down and activate Chameleon. A few seconds later, enemies stop looking for you as if you were never there. It's sort of like a panic button for stealth players. And I wish Jacob had something equally broken instead of mostly receiving combat and brawler focused abilities. But for me, Chameleon easily takes the crown. In fact, it's probably my most used ability in the entire game whenever I unlock it, because it does exactly what I want from a stealth mechanic. It makes stealth easier, and since I absolutely love ghosting, it was exactly what I needed. Now we can officially say that the games from this point onward have a very clear power scaling system when it comes to abilities. Because with Origins, the series completely shifted towards the RPG formula, which means Bayek's abilities now come directly from a skill tree, and there are dozens of skills worth unlocking. Some improve melee combat while others focus on ranged attacks, but the one I consider the most overpowered belongs firmly in the second category. In Origins, bows finally return in full form, and there are 4 different types of them: Hunter, Light, Warrior, and Predator bows. Now the first 3 I mentioned are generally designed for close to medium range combat and can dispatch enemies incredibly quickly. But the Predator bow is different. It's built for long-range assassinations. Think of it as ancient Egypt's version of a sniper rifle. And once you unlock the enhanced Predator bow ability, it becomes overpowered. Normally you'd aim, fire, and hope your shot lands. But after unlocking this skill, you can actually control the arrow's trajectory while it's flying through the air. Yes, you literally steer the arrow. Suppose if you miss the shot by a few inches, you can correct it. Enemy moved at the last second, adjust the shot. It's the ability that sounds broken on paper and somehow ends up being even more broken in practice. And because Predator bows already deal massive damage, this skill turns them into one-hit kill machines against most enemies in the game. The only real exceptions are some of the tougher boss encounters, and if you pair this ability with one of the best Predator bows available, you'll become an absolute ranged god roaming the deserts of ancient Egypt. And it's one of the many reasons I love Origins, because the later game progression genuinely feels like rewarding, because the abilities you unlock don't just make you stronger, they make you feel stronger. Odyssey is basically Origins on steroids. Everything is bigger, flashier, and far more focused on builds. This time you can create fully dedicated playstyles based on 3 categories: Hunter, Warrior, and Assassin. Now Hunter and Warrior builds can be a bit of a pain to master and optimize, but Assassin? That's where things get interesting. It's probably the easiest build to get value from, and if you mix and match it with a few other perks, you'll have a pretty solid grip on the game's mechanics. But you're probably wondering, this video isn't about builds, what's the most overpowered ability? And that's where I introduce you to Rush Assassination. In simple terms, it's basically a double assassination but buffed up a lot. With this ability, you can do chain assassinations from one enemy to another without even physically moving between them. And if I'm not mistaken, you can take out more than 4 enemies in a single chain once you have upgraded it, which is insane. And as I mentioned before, when combined with a proper assassin build, almost every regular enemy becomes free experience points. Cause they don't fight back, they don't react, they just disappear. And in some cases, you can even chunk down some of the toughest enemies and bosses in the game, provided you have invested enough into your gear, perks, and stats. And just like the enhanced Predator bow in Origins, this became my most used ability in the entire game, not only because it's effective, but because it's fast and looks cool. You literally teleport from one enemy to another, eliminating them before they even realize what's happening. Now, Valhalla is a very different game when it comes to abilities, because instead of having a full-fledged skill and ability system like Origins and Odyssey, abilities are unlocked through books of knowledge scattered across the world. Without finding those books, you're basically missing out on some of the best tools in the game. Most of them were hidden behind environmental puzzles, secret passages, and little exploration challenges that actually made finding abilities feel rewarding. At least most of the time, especially when Harpoon Impalement is waiting for you on the other side. And I'm pretty sure almost all of you had this ability sitting somewhere in your ability wheel. Now, this ability is basically Ubisoft's answer to the rope dart in the RPG games, because the rope dart technically didn't exist during Eivor's time, as it wasn't invented until centuries later. But don't let the name fool you, the thing is very overpowered. At its base level, the ability lets you grab enemies and drag them around the battlefield, which is already pretty fun, but the real magic happens once you unlock its upgrade. And this is where the ability becomes completely broken. Any enemy you use it on is practically dead the moment you use it. You hook them, launch yourself forward, and finish them off in one brutal sequence. And the way Eivor executes it is absolutely fantastic. That split-second leap, the slow motion, the impact, everything about it feels satisfying. And then comes the cherry on top, the dismemberment. The moment the finishing strike lands, limbs start flying and the entire attack suddenly looks like something straight out of an action movie. It's brutal, effective, and cinematic, and if you're the type of player who enjoys making stealth montages or farming aura points for cool clips, This ability is basically mandatory because Valhalla has a lot of strong abilities, but Harpoon Impalement, that's a certified GOAT. Now, I know that whenever Mirage comes to mind, most of you expect me to say Assassin Focus, and that's a fair guess. It's an already overpowered ability, there's no denying that. But the reason I didn't choose it is because it's completely optional. You can ignore it for the entire game and still clear stealth sections without much trouble. Trust me, I did exactly that on the hardest difficulty. So if not Assassin Focus, then what ability could possibly be even better? The answer lies within Mirage's tools, more specifically the Smoke Bomb, but not the kind of smoke bomb you're expecting. In Mirage, every tool can be upgraded through multiple tiers, and each tier unlocks different perks and enhancements that completely change how the tool functions. The Smoke Bomb is no exception. Once you reach tier 2, you unlock a perk called Smoke Healing. And it does exactly what the name suggests, it heals you. Now that might not sound impressive at first, but if you've played Mirage, you'll know that the hardest part of the game isn't stealth, it's combat. Because let's be honest, combat is rough. Basim loses stealth incredibly quickly, and if you get surrounded, things can go downhill fast. Which is why smoke healing is so useful. Instead of wasting your precious elixirs every time you take damage, you can simply throw down a smoke bomb. And as long as you're standing inside its radius, your health starts regenerating. Simple, effective, and valuable. This becomes even more important in permadeath mode where every mistake can potentially end your entire run. Which is why for me, smoke healing is the ability I'd never leave home without. Just like Syndicate, we have a dual protagonist situation once again, but this time the difference between the two characters is much more apparent. In fact, it's reflected directly in their skill trees. The game offers two distinct progression paths for Yasuke and Naue, making their gameplay styles feel genuinely different from one another, and I love that. But when it comes to overpowered abilities, Yasuke doesn't really have anything that stands out to me. Sure, he has plenty of powerful skills, but most of them simply make him better at what he's already built for: combat. And since Yasuke is already a walking tank capable of bulldozing his way through enemies, those abilities never felt particularly game-changing to me. Which leaves us with Naue, and more specifically, Heightened Senses. Now this ability is very different from the usual overpowered abilities we've talked about, because it doesn't increase your damage, it doesn't make your assassination stronger, and it also doesn't instantly eliminate enemies. What it does is arguably even better. It gives you a second chance. The moment you're detected, you can activate Heightened Senses and trigger an extended slow motion window. And when I say extended, I mean extended. Suddenly, everything around you slows down. Enemies become easier to track, projectiles become easier to avoid, and if you're quick enough, you can eliminate multiple threats before they even get the opportunity to react. The possibilities are endless, and this is why I consider it Naue's most overpowered ability, because unlike Yasuke, Naue is a glass cannon. She excels in stealth, but direct combat can go very wrong very quickly. But Heightened Senses fixes that problem. It turns what should be a fatal mistake into a recoverable situation, allowing you to save yourself while looking absolutely badass in the process. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. I try to be as descriptive and as honest as possible because that was the whole point of this list. But now I'm curious, which ability did you use the most throughout the Assassin's Creed series? Did you agree with my picks, or is there another overpowered skill or ability that you think deserved a spot on this list? And while you're at it, tell me what Assassin's Creed topic you'd like me to see covered next. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe for more Assassin's Creed content, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care and goodbye.